Be me, Caleb, 28. I work in logistics. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. I own my apartment, I have a few good hobbies, and my life is generally quiet. That's how I like it. No drama. Be not me, Rowan, also 28. We've been friends since college. So, over a decade now. Back then, she was just a normal person. Funny, a bit quirky, maybe a little chaotic, but in a charming way. We were part of the same big friend group, but she and I were always closer. I was her go-to guy, the reliable one. I'm not saying that to brag, it's just how it was. My truck was basically her personal moving van. Caleb, can you help me get this new bookshelf? Caleb, my car's making a weird noise. Can you look at it? Caleb, my flight gets in at 1 a.m. Can you pick me up? The answer was always yes. I didn't mind. That's what friends do. I remember one time, must have been a couple of years back, she decided to buy this massive, complicated bed frame from IKEA. The kind with 100 pages of instructions written in hieroglyphics. She and her roommate, another girl, spent a whole Saturday trying to assemble it. Got a call around 8 p.m. She was on the verge of tears. Said they'd put the main frame on backward and couldn't get it apart. There were screws and wooden dowels everywhere. I drove over after a long day at work. Brought a pizza because I figured they hadn't eaten. Walked into a scene of pure chaos. The room looked like a Swedish furniture factory had exploded. I didn't say a word, just put the pizza down, cracked my knuckles, and got to work. Took me 2 hours, but I disassembled their mistake and put the whole thing together correctly, solid as a rock. She gave me a huge hug, said I was a lifesaver. That was our dynamic. She'd get into some kind of mess, and I'd be the calm, practical force that helped her sort it out. It wasn't just physical stuff, either. She dated a string of guys who were, to put it mildly, not great. Starving artists, amateur musicians, guys who thought having a trust fund was a substitute for a personality. Every breakup was a 5-alarm fire. There were a lot of late-night calls. I'd listen for hours as she cried and vented about how some guy named Jasper or Orion had failed to honor her emotional space. I never judged. I just listened. Told her she deserved better. Offered to take her out for coffee to get her mind off things. I was her emotional rock, her personal handyman, her 24/7 support line. And for years it worked. We had a great friendship. Our whole group did. We'd have game nights, go camping, celebrate birthdays. It was simple. It was good. Then, maybe 2 years ago, something started to change. It was slow at first, barely noticeable. Rowan got really into online social justice circles. Nothing wrong with that on its own, I guess. But it started to consume her. Her entire vocabulary changed. Suddenly, everything was about the patriarchy, microaggressions, and problematic media. We'd be watching a movie, an old action flick from the 80s we'd all seen a dozen times, and she'd pause it to deliver a lecture on its toxic masculinity. The first few times we all just kind of laughed it off. Okay, Rowan, we get it. But she wasn't joking. She started analyzing every little interaction through this new lens. One time I held a door open for her and a couple of our friends. Later, she took me aside and explained that while she appreciated the thought, it was a benevolent sexism gesture rooted in the patriarchal idea that women are weak and need protection. I just blinked at her. I told her my dad taught me to hold the door for anyone behind me, man or woman. She said that was the problem, that I was perpetuating internalized patriarchal norms without even realizing it. I didn't know what to say. It felt like I was being accused of a thought crime I didn't even know existed. The fun, easygoing vibe of our friendship started to evaporate. It was replaced by this constant tension, like I was walking through a minefield. I couldn't tell a joke without worrying it would be deconstructed as problematic. I couldn't express an opinion without it being filtered through her ideological checklist. She told me once, completely seriously, that our long friendship was only possible because she was doing the unpaid emotional labor of educating me on my own male privilege. Think about that. 10 years of friendship, the moving days, the late-night calls, the IKEA furniture, wasn't a two-way street. In her new worldview, it was her performing a service for me. The dynamic shifted. I wasn't her friend anymore. I was her student, her project, and I was a failing student. It started to affect our larger friend group. Game nights became unbearable. We couldn't play certain games because their themes were colonialist, or the character art was objectifying. Conversations became lectures. She would dominate every discussion, steering it toward her preferred topics. You could be talking about what to order for dinner, and somehow it would end up being a monologue about gender roles in the food service industry. People started making excuses to not show up. The group chats grew quiet. I tried to talk to her about it once, very gently. It was after a get-together where she made one of our friends deeply uncomfortable by accusing him of mansplaining when he was just enthusiastically talking about his new hobby. I took her aside later and said maybe she could tone it down a little, that she was alienating people. That was a huge mistake. She turned on me instantly. My concern wasn't genuine, she said. It was a manifestation of my male fragility. I was trying to silence her because her truth made me uncomfortable. I was tone policing a woman, one of the oldest tricks in the patriarchal playbook. There was no getting through to her. She had a prepackaged, jargon-filled answer for everything. It was like arguing with a chatbot. I gave up. I just tried to keep the peace. I'd nod along to her rants, keep my opinions to myself, and try to steer conversations to safe, neutral topics. But the demands on me, her personal handyman, never stopped. In fact, they got worse. Now, when she asked for help, it came with a new sense of entitlement. It was as if my help was a form of reparations. I owed it to her. Last summer, her air conditioner broke during a massive heat wave. She called me in a panic. I was at a family barbecue, an hour's drive away. I excused myself, left early, and drove all the way to her place. It was an old window unit. The fan was clogged with years of dust and grime. A simple fix just needed a deep clean. I spent the next hour taking it apart on her balcony, in the sweltering heat, cleaning every single fin and blade with a brush. It was a disgusting, sweaty job. When I finished and the unit was humming along, pumping out cold air, I came back inside, covered in grime. She didn't thank me. She handed me a glass of water and said, "It's good that you're learning to use your male privilege for constructive, service-oriented tasks for a change." I just stood there, speechless. The old Caleb would have laughed it off or made a sarcastic comment, but I was just tired. So incredibly tired. I drank the water, said, "You're welcome," and left. On the drive home, I seriously considered just ending the friendship right there. But we had so much history, a decade. You don't just throw that away. Or so I thought. I decided to create some distance. I stopped being so available. When she'd text with some non-urgent crisis, I'd wait a few hours to reply. I started saying no more often. "Sorry, Rowan, I'm busy that day." "Sorry, I can't. I have other plans." This did not go over well. She accused me of being a bad friend, of being selfish. One time, she wanted me to help her move a giant, heavy potted plant from her living room to her balcony. I had a legitimate scheduling conflict, a work thing I couldn't get out of. I explained this to her. Her response was an essay-length text message about how men are socialized to see their careers as more important than their relationships, and how my refusal to help her was a classic example of weaponized incompetence and male emotional withdrawal. I was withdrawing my labor, she claimed, because she was no longer centering my ego. It was exhausting. It felt like I was being held hostage by our shared history. The other friends saw it too. They would text me privately after she'd have one of her outbursts. "Dude, are you okay? She was way out of line. I don't know how you put up with it." But no one ever said anything to her face. Everyone was too afraid of getting a lecture. So we all just silently enabled it, walking on eggshells around her. The situation was becoming more and more isolating for her, but she couldn't see it. In her mind, she was the brave truth-teller, and we were all just too blind or fragile to handle her enlightened perspective. The irony was that while she was lecturing me about my privilege, she was one of the most privileged people I knew. Her parents paid for half her rent. She worked a cushy 20-hour-a-week job at a coffee shop. She had endless free time to read obscure theory online and diagnose the world's problems from her laptop. Meanwhile, I was working 50 hours a week in a physically demanding job to keep my life afloat. But in her black and white world, I was the oppressor, and she was the oppressed. The final straw came about 3 months ago. It was our friend Mark's 30th birthday. He decided to have a low-key party at his apartment. Just the core group, maybe 10 of us. I almost didn't go. I knew Rowan would be there, and I just didn't have the energy for another ideological battle. But Mark was one of my best friends, so I sucked it up. For the first hour, things were surprisingly normal. Rowan was actually being pleasant. We were all sharing old stories, laughing. It felt like the old days. I let my guard down. I thought maybe, just maybe, the old Rowan was still in there somewhere. Then someone brought out a board game. It was one of those cooperative games where you're all on a team, trying to beat the game itself. We were having a good time. The stakes were low, lots of joking around. At one point, we had to make a strategic decision. There were 2 choices. Option A was safer, but with a lower reward. Option B was risky, but could win us the game. The group was split. I made a calm, logical case for option B, explaining the probability and the potential payoff. I wasn't being pushy. I just laid out my reasoning. Here's why I think this is the better move. A few others agreed with me. We talked it over for a minute, and the group decided to go with option B. Rowan had been silent the whole time, just watching with a tight expression on her face. As soon as the decision was made, she threw her game pieces down on the table. Not aggressively, but with this dramatic, deliberate finality. The whole room went quiet. Mark, the birthday boy, asked her what was wrong, and she just looked at me, right at me, across the table. Her voice was calm, but it was dripping with this cold, academic fury. "This is a perfect example of what I'm always talking about," she said to the room, but her eyes were locked on mine. "Did you see what just happened? Did you see how Caleb used classic patriarchal conversational tactics to dominate the group?" I could feel every muscle in my body tense up. "He spoke with unearned confidence," she continued, her voice rising slightly. "He presented his subjective opinion as objective fact. He used logic and statistics as a tool to dismiss other, more intuitive approaches. He didn't build consensus. He asserted his authority until people gave in." Someone mumbled, "Dude, it's just a board game." That was like throwing gasoline on the fire. "It is never just a board game," she snapped. "These are the micro-level power dynamics that replicate the oppressive structures of our entire society. This isn't about winning or losing. It's about how the masculine desire to win and be right steamrolls collaborative, feminine forms of communication. The air in the room was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. Mark looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. I didn't say anything. I just stared back at her. I was done trying to reason with her, done trying to defend myself. I just sat there, waiting for the storm to pass. But the storm wasn't passing. It was heading right for me. She stood up. "You know what, Caleb? I'm tired of this. I am tired of putting in the work to maintain a relationship with someone who refuses to see the harm he causes. My heart was pounding. I knew this was it. This was the moment everything was going to break. For years, I have tried to educate you. I have been patient, but you are actively resisting growth. Your male ego is so fragile that you can't even handle being challenged in a board game. She took a step towards me. The party was officially over. It was now the Rowan show, and we were all her captive audience. "This isn't about the game," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly serious tone. "This is about everything. It's about the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you take up space in the world without ever thinking about it." She took another breath, and this is when she delivered the final blow. "If this friendship means anything to you," she said, her voice trembling with self-righteousness, "I need you to apologize, right now, in front of everyone." I just looked at her, waiting for the punchline. "And I don't mean apologize for the game," she clarified, as if reading my mind. "That's trivial. I need you to apologize for the underlying behavior, for your privilege. I need you to look at me and apologize for the systemic harm you represent just by being a man." The silence that followed was absolute. It was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Everyone was frozen, staring at us. They looked horrified, embarrassed, but most of all, they looked helpless. I looked around the room, at the faces of my friends. I saw pity. I saw fear. And then I looked back at Rowan. Her expression was one of stern expectation. She genuinely believed this was a reasonable request. She thought this was a moment of profound breakthrough, a test of my character. In that instant, something inside me just snapped. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet, clean break. All the years of frustration, of walking on eggshells, of biting my tongue, it all coalesced into a single, clarifying thought. I don't have to do this. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel hurt. All I felt was a profound sense of release. The burden of this friendship, a weight I hadn't even fully realized I was carrying, suddenly lifted. I calmly placed my game pieces on the table. I stood up from my chair, pushing it in neatly. I looked at Mark, the birthday boy, who looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. I gave him a small, sad smile. "Happy birthday, man. I'm sorry about this. I'll call you tomorrow." And then, without a single glance back at Rowan, I walked out of the apartment. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently behind me. Walking down the hallway to the elevator, I felt nothing but a strange, hollow peace. My phone started buzzing in my pocket almost immediately. I pulled it out, a string of texts from Rowan. "Are you serious? You're just going to walk away? This is peak male fragility. You can't handle being held accountable. Come back here and face your issues like an adult." Then a call. I didn't answer. Then another. I didn't answer. I got into my truck, sat in the driver's seat, and just stared at the steering wheel for a long moment. Then I opened my phone. I went to her contact. I blocked her number. I went to every social media platform we were connected on. Block, block, block. I severed every digital tie. It felt like I was performing a surgical procedure. Precise, clean, and absolutely necessary. I started my truck and drove home. I expected to feel sad. I expected to feel angry or to second-guess myself. Instead, I felt an incredible lightness. I got home, put on some music, and for the first time in a long time, my own apartment felt truly peaceful. The next day, I got texts from Mark and a few other friends from the party. All of them were variations of the same message. "I'm so sorry, dude. That was insane. Are you okay?" I told them I was fine. Better than fine, actually. Mark told me what happened after I left. Apparently, the party fell apart in minutes. Rowan tried to continue her victory lap, explaining to everyone how my exit was proof of my toxicity. Nobody engaged. The atmosphere was just dead. People started making their excuses and leaving one by one. Within half an hour, it was just her and Mark left, standing in the wreckage of his birthday party. She apparently tried to get him on her side, saying, "See? That's what I have to deal with." Mark, to his credit, just looked at her and said, "Rowan, you just destroyed my 30th birthday party to make a point. I think you need to go home." That was the last any of them heard from her for a while. The days that followed were blissfully quiet. No angry texts, no passive-aggressive social media posts showing up on my feed, no feeling of dread every time my phone buzzed. It was like a constant low-level background noise I'd gotten used to had suddenly been switched off. The true test came about a week later. I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from Rowan. Her voice was different. No anger, just a kind of baffled, demanding tone. "Caleb, this has gone on long enough. I haven't heard from you. I assume you've had some time to reflect on your behavior. I'm willing to hear your apology now and discuss how we can move forward." She still didn't get it. She still thought she was in the right, that my silence was some kind of childish tantrum, and that I'd eventually come crawling back. I deleted the voicemail without a second thought. 2 weeks later, she tried a different tactic. She started messaging our mutual friends, trying to use them as go-betweens. "Can you please tell Caleb to stop being so immature and talk to me? Can you ask Caleb what his problem is?" Most of our friends just ignored her or gave non-committal answers. One of our female friends, Sarah, finally got fed up and told her the truth. Sarah told me about the conversation later. She told Rowan, "His problem is you. You spent 2 years treating him like your personal unpaid therapist and handyman, while constantly insulting him and his entire gender. You humiliated him at his best friend's birthday party and then demanded he apologize for his own existence. He doesn't owe you a conversation. He doesn't owe you anything." Rowan's response was to call Sarah a pick-me and accuse her of having internalized misogyny. That was the final nail in the coffin for her relationship with the rest of the group. People stopped responding to her messages altogether. Her self-created echo chamber had finally left her completely alone. Life without her was a revelation. I had so much more free time and energy. I got back into hobbies I'd let slide because I was always on call for her dramas. I started going to the gym more regularly. I spent weekends working on my truck or going hiking. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen as much because it was always so hard to organize things with Rowan in the mix. It felt like I had removed a source of chronic inflammation from my life. I didn't realize how much of my mental bandwidth she had been occupying until she was gone. A few months passed. I almost forgot about her entirely. Then, one Saturday, I was at a local hardware store picking up some supplies for a project. As I was heading to the checkout, I saw her. She was in the plumbing aisle, staring helplessly at a wall of pipes and fittings. She had a leaky faucet in a plastic bag. She looked stressed and miserable. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. I saw a flash of panic in her face, then a flicker of hope, as if she thought I would come over and rescue her, just like old times. I didn't scowl. I didn't smile. I just gave her a polite, neutral nod. The kind of nod you give a stranger you accidentally make eye contact with. And then I just kept walking. I didn't look back. I paid for my things, got in my truck, and left. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about self-preservation. My peace was more valuable than her convenience. The final update came a little while after that. I ran into her old roommate, the one who was there for the IKEA bed disaster. She had moved out not long after I cut contact with Rowan. We chatted for a bit, and I asked how she was doing. She told me that life with Rowan had become impossible. Without me as a buffer, Rowan's ideological rants and constant sense of victimhood became focused on her. Every minor disagreement about cleaning or bills was turned into a lecture on power dynamics and oppression. She also mentioned that Rowan was struggling financially. Little things I used to help with for free, fixing a running toilet, patching a hole in the wall, changing her car's oil, were now costing her hundreds of dollars in professional service fees. Her life had become more difficult, more expensive, and more lonely, all as a direct result of her own actions. And she still, to this day, apparently tells anyone who will listen that it's all because her male friend couldn't handle being held accountable. She's the perpetual victim of her own story. I don't hate her. I don't wish her ill. I just feel a kind of distant pity. She built a prison of ideology around herself, and then got angry when everyone else refused to live in it with her. Sometimes I think about that night at the party. She demanded I apologize for being a man, but walking away from her and choosing my own peace and self-respect was the most powerful thing I could have done. I didn't have to fight. I didn't have to argue. I didn't have to win. I just had to leave. It turns out the greatest privilege is the freedom to walk away from a game you're not willing to play, and my life has been a hell of a lot better ever since.